Hi, it's Cindy Reed, the Director of Academics with the Celebrant Foundation and Institute on February 11th, 2010. And I'm pleased today to be sitting here with Jessie Blum, one of our wedding celebrants and also a member of our wedding faculty. And she's going to be talking to us about a very interesting wedding that she performed for a couple named Sarah and John with lots of interesting elements. So welcome, Jessie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today.
Terrific. What I'm going to do is kind of go over the process of the ceremony, how you found the couple, where you interviewed them, what that was like, and then we have some wonderful photos from the ceremony that we can go through and you can just talk to us about that, kind of like a slideshow. So how
Sure.
did this couple find you?
Well, Sarah is actually my wedding photographer, and technically I found her. I was interviewing her about photographing my wedding, and because I'm a celebrant and because I like to talk to other people about their weddings, I kept on asking her questions about her own wedding. She was getting married about 5 months after our meeting. And because she's a wedding photographer and she sees a lot of weddings, she had a lot of really interesting and really great ideas for her ceremony that she was telling me about. So about 2 months after our meeting, she contacted me and said that she was having some trouble with the justice of the peace that she had hired to do her ceremony. She didn't really want to personalize it a lot, the justice of the peace. So she let her justice of the peace go, and she asked me to do her ceremony, and we basically went from there.
Well, it sounds like if she wanted to personalize it a lot, that you might be the perfect person for her to find.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, from what Sarah had told me about her ceremony and what she told me afterwards as well, it really seemed like she was looking for a celebrant the entire time, but like a lot of couples, she didn't know that celebrants existed or that we were out there to create personalized ceremonies. She really thought that to do it, you had to write your ceremony yourself and just hire someone to stand up there and make it legal for you. So,
right, sort of hand off your script to someone else.
Yep.
Where did you interview them? So essentially, she hired you before you interviewed them. So there was no typical no-obligation interview in this?
Correct. But when we went into her interview, it was much more of a working interview because she and her husband had really already made the decision. She sent me beforehand a outline of everything she wanted. I used that to customize my own outline that I brought and discussed with her. And we met up at a Starbucks. The Starbucks I chose was not the best place to meet because it never had any tables, and I had to get there about half an hour early to camp out and make sure I got a table. And I usually do meet my couples at a Starbucks or a coffee shop. Panera's are my favorite because they always have good tables available.
And how do you feel like your clients feel about that? Do you think they feel it's less professional that you're meeting at Starbucks and Panera, or are people pretty much okay with it?
People seem to be really okay with it. A lot of people like to meet in a neutral location. I do have a home office, but I don't really I have cats. I don't want people to come over if they're not like cat fans or something like that. So I think that people really don't mind doing that at all. It's also nice to go out. You have a cup of coffee. You don't have to worry about serving people beverages in your own home or anything like that. My couples really don't seem to mind at all. I think that a lot of wedding professionals, not just celebrants, are meeting people in public places like coffee shops. So it's very much expected in the wedding community that that's where people will meet you.
So what was the interview process like? It was a working interview, and they had some vision for their ceremony. So how did you work together that first day at Starbucks? Well,
that first day, I came with an outline. I do bring a more general outline to all of my first meetings, the no-obligation consultations. But this one was a little more personalized because Sarah had already emailed me the outline she had emailed to her original JP. So I had a really basic working outline. I took her information. I put it into the kind of structure I like to work with. And we just kind of talked through it. I talked a little bit about what I do to explain more to her husband, who hadn't met me before. And we just kind of worked together to figure out the structure, how it would work, and logistics of it all.
And so what did you go home with that day? A bunch of notes, I'm imagining?
Yep, I went home with a bunch of notes all over in the outline. I made 2 copies, one for them and one for me. I asked them a few questions about their personal details, how they met, how they got engaged, their first date, that stuff. So I had a few notes on that as well that I used as the basis for their love story on top of the questionnaire that I gave them also.
And when do you give them the questionnaire?
I usually email the questionnaire after I get the contract and the first payments. So for Sarah and John, we had signed the contracts at the meeting. And we worked for trade, Sarah and I, so there wasn't a payment. She gave me a discount on my wedding photography. So after I got that contract, and theoretically after I would get the payment, I then emailed them the homework. They can type it up, because by bringing in the packet, I oftentimes then get people who like to write all over it and then scan it and email it to me, which is not fun at all.
A little bit more difficult to work with.
Yes.
Scanned or faxed illegible handwriting.
Absolutely. I put in really, after a few incidents, I put in really big letters at the top of my homework. Please type your answers and email to me.
And when you call it the homework, what you mean is that questionnaire about their narrative story and other things that they want in the wedding?
Yep, it's the questionnaire about all the details about them, their families, what they want in their wedding, all that fun stuff.
So tell me, there were so many interesting elements in this, and I want to talk about one before we go to the photographs that's not really shown in the photographs, and that was this issue of surprise readings. The readers weren't surprises, but they got to choose their own. How did that work?
Well, this was something that Sarah and John came to the table with. They weren't having a bridal party, so it was really important for them to find other ways to incorporate their family and their friends in the ceremony. And the way they incorporated their friends was they had 3 sets of friends, 3 couples, 6 people total, choose surprise readings for the ceremony. So the way that this worked is I contacted the friends directly. Sarah sent me their contact information, and they got to pick the readings they were going to do. And Sarah and John did not see them before the ceremony. The readers would email them back to me, and I would kind of like sign off on them to make sure they were okay. And then, based on the content, I would place them in the ceremony. It actually worked out remarkably well. We got 3 really great readings that really fit in different parts of the ceremony. There was a reading by Charles Darwin that he wrote that I'd never seen before, which I thought was great. And he wrote it in his diary right before he was getting married as kind of like pros and cons of getting married. And we did that right in the beginning.
Reading. I hadn't seen that reading before either, and especially to have it read by 2 people was it was just fantastic. I thought it was a fun reading, but it also had a lot of really great things in it about how wonderful it is to be married versus to be, old and alone.
Absolutely, and it works so fabulously as a dialogue. It was a perfect reading. I couldn't have picked something better if I got to handpick everything in the ceremony. And we put that at the beginning, and it really set the tone for the rest of the ceremony because it's really sweet, but it's kind of funny and really interesting. And then the next reading they chose was a passage from the Velveteen Rabbit, which actually I find is a really popular reading in untraditional ceremonies. It's like something people choose as an untraditional reading a lot, if that makes sense at all.
It's a popular atypical reading.
Yes, exactly. So, and that worked well again with 2 people because it's a piece that's a dialogue between the Skin Horse character and the Velveteen Rabbit character, and we broke it up almost like a theater piece for them. And then the last couple chose 2 love poems, which was a beautiful and wonderful way to close the ceremony. And I used it right before my closing remarks, right before the declaration of marriage. And they were beautiful, and it worked out really, really well.
I think love poems like that sometimes operate almost like a benediction would in a religious ceremony. So it does add that feeling of closure to the whole thing.
Yes, and they did want no religion in their ceremony. It was a spiritual but non-religious ceremony. So again, including the love poems at the end was almost like a non-religious or non-spiritual blessing. It was a great way to close the ceremony.
Now, that was obviously a lot of participation. You had 6 different readers, but that was part of their vision for the ceremony, right?
Yeah, they really wanted it to feel like everyone was included in the ceremony, and it was very much community-based, so it was really important to them to include 6 additional readers. I mean, I'm happy that they chose to do it as 3 sets instead of 6 sets time-wise, but I think it worked out really well in the end.
Yeah, 6 sets might have been a little much by the end of the
Yeah, we might have to edit that down a bit.
Describe the venue for me, and I pulled up one of our photos here. The first one just kind of gives a sense of the colors, and I think this sort of gives a sense of that it's not a pageant in a way, because these are sort of country flowers in a little country box there.
Yeah, it was at the estate of Daniel Chester, who designed the Lincoln Memorial. It's called the Chesterwood Mansion. It's in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. It's beautiful old country house on these gorgeous grounds with gardens and sculpture. It was just like, and the ceremony was in July, and you just go there, and everything was in bloom, and everything was really lush and beautiful with all these gorgeous 19th century sculptures everywhere. So it was a beautiful, beautiful venue.
The ceremony starts off with a really interesting participatory ritual. Oh, wait, I didn't realize this was the next photo. Let's talk about this, and then we'll get to the beautiful participatory photo. High tops and rings. Tell me about it.
Well, so orange was the big color for everything. Their colors were citrus. So it was orange and yellows and greens. And I remember, like, one of the first things Sarah said to me when I asked her about her wedding in my original photography interview was, we're going to wear Converse at the reception, and she was so excited about it. And I think it kind of sets the tone for the really lighthearted spirit they had with the entire ceremony. Mm-hmm. That it was fun, and it was them.
Very much so. So there we go. Here's the circle of love, this flower circle. Tell me about how that ritual came about and how it was executed in the ceremony.
Well, like a lot of the rituals, again, Sarah and John came to me with it. They got the original idea from the episode of John and Kate Plus 8, where they go to Hawaii and they renew their vows. And it's actually based on a Hawaiian ritual where there's already a static ring of, like, beautiful flowers up at the front. And the couple gets there and walks into them, and then the minister, the officiant, talks about what the flowers represent, the individuality of each person who's there, and all of this stuff. And Sarah and John wanted to make it, like so much of this ceremony, much, much more interactive. So what they did was they had all of their family members, their siblings partners, their nieces and nephews, and their parents enter during the processional, like where the bridal party would go. And they all held flowers, and they came to the front. You can see I kind of drew a circle in the gravel up there as a guide, and I was already up there, so I kind of pointed where the flowers should go as well. And they each placed the flower in the circle, and it represented the sacred space that Sarah and John were going to be married in, as well as the love that they would be surrounded from by their family and friends.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's so participatory, and it's so, again, sets the tone for the feel of the wedding that they wanted.
Absolutely, and it was so interesting. As Sarah told me about this, and I started to write it into her ceremony, and then I realized I had a couple who I had met with months before who was looking for this exact ritual in their ceremony, but I hadn't heard of it yet. So they got married on a beach, and we did it with shells for them. And they had everyone there do it. So when their family and friends entered at the beginning, they had an usher who had a basket of shells who would take a shell and had everyone take a shell, walk to the front, and place it. So everyone there got to place a shell. The circle was much larger this time, but it was just perfect. It creates such an amazing sense of community, of interaction, and it's so beautiful to be literally married in a circle that's surrounded by your family and friends' love.
And to create the ceremonial space, I mean, how much better can it be than to center and focus yourself and get into that time, that sort of sacred time that we talk about, than to be a part of it, the part of the creation of it. It's
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Let's see what we have next. Okay, so here's the processional. I love the mom's dress. That teal is just beautiful.
It's so cute with her little bouquet.
Yeah. And so
you can see her dad's holding the flower also that he placed at
that he's going to be placing up there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is them walking down. And you can just see the joy on their face and the beautiful grounds there. I think the next thing I wanted to talk about is this tree planting ritual. That was fantastic because it's not just your ordinary tree planting ritual. It is involved with connecting generations. It becomes a symbol of, grandmother to mother to daughter. Talk about how that came about.
Well, it just worked so perfectly for them. They're both gardeners. Sarah told me that before she met John, she used to spend all her money on shoes. And now she spends all her money on potted plants at Home Depot. So that kind of was the arc of their relationship. They're very much into nesting and creating their home. So gardening and planting was so important to them. As you said, Cindy, the sapling came from a cutting in Sarah's mom's yard. And that tree had come from Sarah's grandmother's yard. So it was so cool because the tree literally had roots in her history, which is just like mind-blowing how awesome and perfect the ritual worked out for them.
It really is. Now, they didn't live in Massachusetts, so what did they do with this tree after the ceremony? Do you know how that worked?
I believe that their day of coordinator took very good care of it and took it home for them. They both live in Philadelphia. So once they took it home, I'm pretty sure they either replanted it into a larger pot to let it get some roots and then replanted it in the soil, or they put it in the soil. I honestly don't know that much about gardening, but I'm sure that they took really good care of it to make sure that it did arrive safely to their home.
Right. This is why I personally don't include plantings in my own ceremony, because I'm so afraid the symbol would wither and die on the vine. So, I had another question on that.
Do you want me? I could talk about how we did it logistically.
Right. How was it choreographed?
Well, you can see we had that small table to the side, and we had the pot there. We also had a very small vase of water and a little container of dirt. So they weren't actually planting it. It was already planted. And together with my prompting, they poured the dirt on top and kind of patted it in. And then together they poured the water on top, and we talked about what the water represented, what the earth represented, and we're very careful with the small amount that we didn't get muddy water on anyone or anything like that. And it worked really, really well because we were giving all the explanations, but I was also prompting them with each thing so they didn't have to, remember where they had to do anything.
Now, what kind of a mic were you on? Were you able to move about?
Yes, I was lucky enough to have a lapel mic for the ceremony. And then, because we had so many readers, and we also had family members who were coming up to do explanations of some of the ceremonies, like you can see that person's arm in the corner, and that's John's sister who came up and did the explanation of the tree planting ceremony. And right over to the side there, we had another mic on a mic stand that the readers used, so I didn't have to be handing off a mic. And it was great because there was so much going on in the ceremony that I really could easily walk around. I had an extra hand, because usually I'm holding the mic with one hand and holding my book with one hand. That's
nice, a real sense of freedom to be able to do that. Was there linen or something up there where they could wipe their hands off?
No, we didn't do that. I mean, that would have been a really good idea.
I just see that white dress and that sort of moist soil, and that's the first thing I think of.
I'm not sure what she did. She may have wiped her hands on the tablecloth.
That would work.
Yes. If someone else does this ritual, having a nice little cloth up there to wipe your hands off may be a really good idea.
Right, and usually you're calling her the day of coordinator. Sometimes they're called the maitre d'. Somebody is at the venue, a staff person, if you're at this sort of venue, will be in charge of that, and you can easily ask someone for a nice linen. They have a million of them.
Absolutely.
About the props, there were a lot of props involved in this, and now as a celebrant, of course, you're not responsible for bringing the props. Did you do a props list for them?
Yes, I do that for a lot of my couples. About a week before the wedding, I send them a checklist of all the things they need to remember for their wedding. So props, remind them about the rings because you don't want to forget the rings, the marriage license. And then I started doing this when I don't have rehearsals for people. I just put some reminders of stuff I want them to think about on their wedding day that I may not get a chance to tell them beforehand, which is like, remember to breathe. You don't have to stare at me the entire time.
Right,
Look
right.
at your husband. Look at your family. And this is stuff that I always go over in rehearsals, but I would say I only get to do a rehearsal about 50% of the time just with scheduling. And I find a lot of my couples don't have rehearsals. So I put that in there to make sure that I can assure them that everything's going to be okay and make sure that I do tell them these teeny tiny things that I want to remind them.
Right. And I think that's so important, the don't look at you. I have people looking at me during vows. I remind you're not marrying me. You're marrying your spouse. So
I always tell people, I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to stare at me at all. You don't have to look at me the entire time. I will stand up there no matter what. I want you to look at your fiance. I want you to look at your bridal party. I want you to look at everyone but me.
Right.
And people
be
still
as
stare at me.
present in that moment as you can be. You know,
absolutely.
It's present. Somebody else will be documenting it for you, so
yeah.
not to worry about that. Now for this one note on rehearsals, of course, as celebrants, we encourage rehearsals whenever possible. In fact, for large weddings, I really don't, it's one of the things where I don't give them a choice. If it's a large wedding with a ton of people, you have to rehearse, and I will be there because it reflects on you as the celebrant if the ceremony just goes totally awry because people don't know what they're doing. So just a note on that. For this ceremony, did you do a rehearsal?
Yes, we did do a rehearsal. We didn't do it at the venue, but because this was a destination wedding, they got married in Massachusetts. They're in Philadelphia. I'm in New Jersey. They were nice enough to pay for my hotel the night before the wedding and the night of the wedding. So I only asked for the night of the wedding, so that was really generous of them. So I went up there the day before. I met them at the venue first, which was great because I got to see the space and walk around and take pictures and be a tourist with my fiance. And then we went to the rehearsal dinner, which was at her parents' house, and that's where we had the actual rehearsal. We didn't practice the processional at all. I did go over how the processional was going to work and what people were going to do. But what was really important was that the readers knew that they were reading, first of all, what they were reading, which most of them knew, but some of the people who were doing readings for the rituals hadn't seen it before, so I brought copies for them to take home that night and just look at. And just to know like where they were going in the ceremony so they could be ready to get up and be up there and weren't surprised or nervous because they weren't expecting it.
Right. And here I've just clicked to the next photo, so just a closer up picture of the tree planting, and I think this is a nice thing to see because one thing when you're doing a lot of unusual ceremonies is sometimes I even do a little shot sheet for a photographer, not always. Usually what I do is grab them in the half hour before the ceremony and just say, hey, we're doing these cool things. You'll probably want to be here to get that photograph. And obviously she or he, it looks like a she, it's a Cindy. There you go.
Cindy, yes.
Got a fantastic photo of this. And I think the bride is also a photographer, correct?
Yes, so the bride had actually gone over her entire ceremony with her photographer beforehand. Mm-hmm. Her photographer pulled me aside beforehand and said she was so excited about the ceremony because it was so unusual, mm-hmm. and she was like told me she was like ready for all of these shots. That has never happened to me before.
No,
but
I think they're both in the industry, so
yes,
yeah.
So they were in it. But it is great to just, I always before a ceremony I go to the DJ and I go to the photographer. I tell them if there's anything unusual going on. And I also, the biggest question I get is where the kiss is going to be, because some officiants have them kiss and then keep on talking afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to know, like, if the kiss is going right into the processional, like, where they need to stand for that.
Right.
I do often bring cue sheets for the DJ and for the photographer. The DJ will often take them. The photographer will look at it but won't take it because they like to have their hands free. But
Right.
never hurts to have it. It takes
Right.
a few minutes to make, and it's totally worth it.
And it's something they don't get from most officiants. I especially the musicians I see this look of shock and delight on their face when I hand them that music cue sheet. So
Yeah.
what do we have coming up next? Here's Jessie talking to, I probably imagine this is the vows since they're facing one another.
Mhm.
And again, here we are beginning the ring ceremony. And the one thing I want to talk about the ring ceremony is that you did a lovely thing, and if you blink, you might miss it in the script because you had the mothers do kind of a ring warming blessing here. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, they originally had wanted both sets of parents, the moms and the dads, to come up and present the rings. But unfortunately, in the time between the wedding planning started and the wedding happened, John's parents went through a really, really messy divorce.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
they didn't want to be near each other.
Oh.
So they limited it just to the moms, which is still a very sweet, very touching way to include the moms. The moms had the rings. They came up. They kind of presented them to their children. And then they put their hands out together and held both of the rings while holding each other's hands, the two moms, and just kind of blessed and imbued the rings with love and warmth and all of that good feeling wedding stuff before handing them off to their children.
It's such a great way to include people and to kind of, again, which was their vision here, to feel almost like you're married by the community, certainly within the community.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that Sarah actually said to me when we started putting together the ceremony. She often introduced me as Jessie, the celebrant who's leading our ceremony, because it really was such a community-based thing that I wasn't the person standing up there and marrying them. I was guiding everyone through this entire process of coming up, of reading, of presenting the rings, of doing the vows. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that you said.
Right, you're facilitating it. You're sort of the glue that holds it together, but you were much more than an MC, which bothers me when I see that in ceremonies too. It wasn't like, and now, somebody else will do the hand fasting and somebody else will do this. You were very much guiding, leading, owning that space, but not in that sort of patriarchal or domineering way. It wasn't
a feeling of authority at all. It was very much one of the things we talked about in Celebrancy is working on a peer level, and this felt very much like a peer-led ceremony. I really felt like I was a part of their relationship and a part of their marriage, which isn't necessary to feel with all of your ceremonies, but it's really awesome when it does happen.
Now, have you done ring warmings in other ceremonies?
Yes, I have. The way that it typically works when I do it in other ceremonies is the family doesn't come up to stand with us. They'll usually the ring will be passed between the immediate family who's seated in the first few rows. It'll pass it through them. I also did one once where we passed it through the bridal party. And this was a really large bridal party. They had 18 people in their bridal party. And each bridal party member held the rings and then said something. We passed around a microphone, and they actually said out loud their well wishes for the couple as it was going around. So that was a little bit unusual, but
did that work, or was it too much?
I thought it was going to be too much, and it really worked. For that, of course, we had a very in-depth rehearsal where we passed the rings around with the microphone so people all got a feeling for it, and I really explained that I wanted it to be one sentence. I didn't want them to do a speech. I didn't want them to, talk forever.
Right,
and
this
really,
wasn't the toast at the reception.
Oh, no, and I was like, and please make it appropriate. It was very important. And it actually worked really, really well. It was a really sweet moment. And people didn't say more than a sentence. So that probably won't work for everyone, but it can be done.
go to the next. And here's a close-up of the ring ceremony there. Beautiful, beautiful photographs, really. And let's talk about the hand fastening, because I come to this picture and I see that you have, I believe the cord is draped over your book.
Yep, it's draped over the back of my book, and I kind of use it as a bookmarker. So I put it on the page where the hand fastening is, so when I turn the page and I get to the hand fastening, I can just lift it right off.
Woohoo, there's your prop right there. And I see that there wasn't really a ceremonial table behind you. There was, they walked over to a ceremonial table for the planting.
Yes, it's right behind John, right out of the shot. So we did have to move around a little bit for it.
And one thing, you are standing in between the couple here, but I see that you're, I mean, because of the circle and because of this sort of arbor behind you, there probably weren't many other options for you.
I had actually talked to them about standing to the side, and I was planning on doing it. But you can't see this in any of the photos, which is thanks because they have a fabulous photographer. But there was the warning of rain all day, and they had to put a tent up over where the guests are standing. And the tent severely cut down on the sight lines of everything. Mm-hmm. So if I was going to stand where I originally was going to stand, there was a pole there now. So
yeah, I mean, you have to roll with
what we have.
Right, you have to kind of roll with what you get to. I've had the same thing where there's a gazebo or a chuppah, and there's just really not as many options as you would have in kind of an open space, an open air space.
Yeah, I also find it depends very much on the size of the chuppah. If it's a larger chuppah, I feel like silly if I stand to the side and the couples are under it. Mm-hmm. But I've done it with smaller chuppahs, and I stand to the side, and I'm okay. So it's like, it's very, I always try to talk to my couples about standing to the side. It doesn't always work out.
Right. Right. You have to think both celebrant philosophy sort of versus pragmatics and aesthetics of it, too. So it's always a balance of those things.
Absolutely.
And I think we're leading into the hand fasting here. There's the cord. Tell us about, well, first of all, the cord is beautiful. And then tell us about exactly how you do it. Because I think this, for celebrants starting out, sometimes causes heart palpitations on exactly how this is choreographed.
Well, the cord was knit by John's sister, and it's really gorgeous, gorgeous cord.
It is. It has their colors. It's personal.
Yeah,
it's keepsake.
It's bead at the end, which is great because then it hung really well on their hands, even though it was just some yarn, which was fabulous. And I loved asking my couples to find someone crafty in their family, or if they're crafty, to make it themselves, because it's such a special thing to have. Again, it's part of the whole community aspect of the wedding for them. It was so important that his sister made the cord, and she was so proud of herself, too. Mm-hmm. And the way that it usually works logistically for me is I explain the hand fasting, and I always explain it because people have never seen it before oftentimes, and they might get confused about why we're wrapping their hands up with yarn. I take it off my book, and I place it on top of their hands. Their hands are going right into right and left into left, like they're shaking hands with both hands.
So it makes a figure 8.
Correct. And I explain the symbol of infinity, the meaning behind that, how that works in their relationship as well. And then I place it directly on their hands. I talk a little bit more. I grab one side and wrap it around their hands. I talk a little bit more. I grab the other side and wrap it around their hands, and that's what you're seeing here. It somehow ended up a little bit more on Sarah's wrist, but usually you have it completely wrapped around both of their hands. I don't actually end up tying it at all. Just logistically, it's hard for me to untie it, especially if I have to be holding a microphone, which I wasn't here. And it's just easier to pull off that way. Some celebrants do. It's really a personal preference about how you want to create your own ritual. Mm-hmm. But I find this is a really easy, accessible way to do it.
Right. So then you don't have to worry about the technical aspects of it. You can kind of be present for the beautiful symbolism of it.
Absolutely. And they do get bound together. It's just that they're not like double knotted together.
And then you have to ask for scissors or
then it just
knife in their pocket. And
And then immediately afterwards, for this case, we did do some vows while they were bound together, which we did is repeat after me vows. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. Depends on the couple as well. And then immediately after that, I remove the cord, I put it back on my book, and I return it to them afterwards. So they don't stay bound together for the entire ceremony. That's something a lot of people ask me.
Right. They want to know, are they tied together for the whole ceremony? And that's just not going to logistically work. I think that it's important, though, to take some moments after they're bound to sort of appreciate that symbolism so that you're not racing into the next element of your ceremony.
Absolutely. And when I don't do vows at that point, like special vows as they're bound together, I do wait for a moment. Like I count to 5 and just have them sitting there bound together and looking at each other. So they do have a very special moment together.
Right, and not to be afraid of that that silence and that moment of being present. So I'm going to go to oh, yay! Now we are towards the end of our ceremony, the kiss. I love what she has in her hair.
Yeah, she's so adorable.
It's just beautiful. And I think we have them, this is the recessional then.
Yeah.
And our final photo, of our happy couple. Wow, they're a photogenic couple as well.
I know, right?
What were your favorite parts of the ceremony? Or is there anything that, looking back, that you might change?
I think my favorite part of their ceremony was probably their vows. If you look at the ceremony, they were really funny, but like really relevant and really sweet for them. I also loved, again, with including other people in the ceremony, they had her brother and his sister, the younger sister who knit the hand-fasting cord, came up and prompted them with their vows instead of having me prompt them or instead of having them just read it off of a sheet of paper. And I thought this was so cool. Again, I can't take credit for it. This was their idea. But it was a really great way to incorporate more people in the ceremony. And it was absolutely the most emotional part of the ceremony to share the vows, literally share the vows with your family at that point, but still made it just about them. I think that's something that they succeeded with really well in the ceremony, was they had this amazing community aspect, but the ceremony didn't feel like everyone was getting married. It still felt like it was Sarah and John's wedding.
How many people were there?
About 175.
Really?
Yeah, it's really hard
when you read it. When I first read the ceremony, I thought this was a backyard wedding and that they were actually planting their tree in their own backyard, because that intimacy comes through even on the written page.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they wanted. They wanted it to feel like you were the only other person sharing their wedding with them.
Now, I'm sure since Sarah is your wedding photographer, and congratulations to you, that you've talked to her since the ceremony. How did they feel about the whole process and the ceremony? What kind of feedback did you get from them?
I got really positive feedback from them. They went on this amazing, epic Irish honeymoon right after the ceremony, and I emailed them. I was emailing my couples right afterwards, just telling them how to get their marriage license and thanking them and saying some nice stuff about the wedding I didn't get a chance to say at the actual ceremony. And in hers, I said, please don't answer this until you get back from your honeymoon. And her husband answered me the next day while they were in Ireland, telling me how happy he was with the ceremony and that he couldn't have been happier with how it came out. I also got this amazing note from Sarah's mom, which I never get notes from parents, so this is really special, saying how blessed she thought Sarah and John were to find me because, again, they were looking for a celebrant ceremony the entire time, and they just didn't know it. So I think they were really, really happy with their ceremony from what I've heard from both of them and her parents, and I was so glad I got to be a part of it.
It's such a privilege and an honor what we do to be able to be a part of these milestone moments, and what a gift that you were able to give them. I really think it was kismet that they found you. It was perfect for them, and such a gift for you. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Again, I'm with Jessie Blum. It's Cindy Reed, the director of the Celebrant, academic director for the Celebrant Foundation and Institute. So thank you, Jessie.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.